Correct.
Timothy Leonard joins us.
He does. In studio.
News at 11.
Tim's professional.
Yes, he is very.
Let's talk
very much.
women's basketball. We'll talk men's lacrosse. Let's start with the women's basketball team because, they're in a similar boat as the men. And in fact, even in, going back a week, they were even in more danger of missing out on the ACC tournament than the men were. And then they go out, they get a nice road win at Virginia Tech, and then beat a team that they were supposed to beat yesterday. But you got to win those as well along the way. And now the picture is a little bit brighter.
Yeah, I would say they're in a very good spot now to make the ACC tournament. The way I've calculated, I think if you win one more game, you're pretty much clinched if you get to 5 wins in conference play. And they're going to be favored, I would think, in their final 2 regular season games. They play Pittsburgh and then BC in the final 2 regular season games. Now, I say that BC did beat them by a ton in Chestnut Hill, but it'll be at home. BC hasn't been playing great. They didn't have Georgia Woolley for that game. So I would expect Syracuse to go into that matchup thinking they will win and should beat BC, especially the way they've been playing recently. They've been playing much better. So they're in a very good spot now in terms of making the ACC tournament. And honestly, the goals are now shifting towards, let's see if we can get hot a little bit and get on a run and improve our seed in the ACC tournament. So they got the West Coast swing coming up, which, of course, is a challenge for any team. And the way it works out, they're actually playing Stanford in the first game and then Cal in the second. And I think if you could pick it your preferred way, you would rather flip that because Stanford is not playing great basketball, even though they're a huge program that has had a ton of history on the women's side. They're going to miss the tournament, it seems like, for the first time since 1987, which is a very long streak. They don't have Tara Vanderveer anymore, who is a legendary head coach. So they'll play them in the first game when maybe you're not quite acclimated to the jump of 2 time zones. Cal's a good team that is right around being ranked. So it'll be a tough test, but the way they're playing, I think they could go and beat Stanford in that first game. We
saw that with the men's team. They went out there, they were sleepwalking through that first game and then played a lot better in the second game. So there is something to be said for that. Let's go back to yesterday for a moment. I think we looked at this as they should beat Wake Forest. They did beat Wake Forest. Maybe it wasn't quite as easy as everybody thought. I mean, they were down going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they still have a habit of playing to their competition, which is good when you're on the road at Virginia Tech, and then it's bad when you're hosting Wake Forest at home. They came out a little bit flat, Coach Jack called it yesterday, and I was kind of just waiting for them to sort of kick it into gear. It felt like one of those games where once the home team grabbed the lead, they wouldn't relinquish it because Syracuse is a better team than Wake Forest. And they finally grabbed it with about 7 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. And then they did go on a very nice run, about an 11-0 run there in the fourth quarter and made the winning plays and did some nice things in the fourth. So they're going to have to jump out to a better start against better teams. But it's just weird how it goes this year. They have played very well in road games, especially early on in the games against some of the top teams in the conference. And Virginia Tech was one of those games where they finally just made the right plays and closed the game. And you look at the 2 scores this week, that they did it on Thursday with offense and didn't have much defense. And then they won a game that was 62-50 yesterday, where it was really a struggle offensively for both teams. But they corrected some things in the second half. They were turning it over way too much in the first half. Ended up with 13 turnovers in the game, and 11 of them were in the first half. So they settled in and, as we sort of expected, looked like the better team in the fourth quarter. So for whatever reason, they've just sort of played to competition this year. And I was like going into that game thinking, this is probably going to be a little harder of a win than it should be, knowing how this team has played this year.
And then sure enough, it was.
Yeah.
We saw them make 3 threes yesterday as a team after, Sophie Burrows made 8 all by herself against Virginia Tech. The fact that they went 3 for 13 from 3 and still won, is that a good sign that they found a different way to win, or is that concerning at all that because they're going to need to shoot better than that to beat good teams?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the positive spin is good teams can win in many different ways, and this week they did that. Now, Wake Forest is just not very good, so I think the way they played against Wake was a little bit of a step back from some of their recent games. You really could make an argument that they have outplayed their last 5 opponents and could very easily be on a 5-game winning streak. The 2 games they lost in this stretch, they've won 3 of their last 5, which now that they've gotten healthier, they're kind of playing more to the team that we expected to see throughout much of the season. The two games they've lost in this stretch was NC State at home, a ranked NC State team that they were leading for about 37 minutes of that game, and then Virginia at home, where they were up 14 in the third quarter. So they have actually outplayed probably the last 5 opponents, and some of those have been good teams. So they're really coming together and playing well, and it's like we've talked about throughout the season, their record, if anything, was misleading, and it felt like they were kind of due for a win like that one at Virginia Tech. They got it, and then, like you said, you got to take care of business against the teams like Wake Forest, and they did do that in the end.
All right, let's talk some men's lacrosse, speaking of taking care of business, and they've done that against 2 subpar teams. I mean, Vermont and Jacksonville, it's not like they're playing, Hopkins and Cornell right now, but what did you take from those 2 wins? Because they, not only did they win the games, they were both very impressive. What do you take away from those 2 wins from the men's perspective?
Yeah, I think the defense has looked really sharp through 2 games. And going back to the preseason chatter around the team, I was a little bit worried coming off of the scrimmage at how good they would be defensively right away in their communication level on the defensive end. And that has looked very good. I think it definitely is a step up in competition tonight, and then an even bigger step up on Saturday when they go on the road and play a top 5 Maryland team. So very curious to see how the defense plays tonight. Curious to see how Jimmy McCool plays tonight when you consider that he's looked very good. Statistically, he's been very solid through 2 games, but he hasn't seen a ton of rubber, and he's seen a lot of shots that are pretty easy to save. So that'll be the things I think we're still monitoring and wondering, if you are a championship-level team, do you have a true championship-level defense? And by all indications, through 2 games, it seems they do. They have only allowed 10 goals combined, and a lot of those have been in sort of unsettled transition situations. Also, the man-down defense has been outstanding through 2 games. And if you're not up to speed on the team and not following them each game, they do a very unique thing on their man-down D that really no other teams do in the country, where they bring in a whole different unit, and they've called themselves the Junkyard Dogs unit because they're sort of adopting this approach, taking pride in it. And it's unique because Syracuse is such a deep team. They have so much talent that they can go into their bench and not see much of a drop-off. So this unit is able to practice specifically man down, and they're well-rested when they get out there, and they actually did a very good job against Vermont. Vermont was just 1 for 6 on the man-up, which was pretty big in that game.
Yeah, and a couple of their goals, Vermont, it kind of came during garbage time. It seemed like the game was salted away by the time Vermont scored its last 3 goals there. Looking ahead to this game tonight, is this SU's first true test? I know Towson is ranked. They gave Hopkins a really good game. Hopkins is off to a great start, by the way, up to number 4 in the polls now. Is this truly their first test, or is that on Saturday against Maryland?
It's a game you should win, but it's still, I would say, classify it as truly their first test here. Like, this could definitely be a close game. When you consider the situation, you bring up Hopkins, they were in a very similar situation. They actually went to Towson, but they were on a quick turnaround as well, and they won that game by a goal against a Towson team that I would expect this will be in the neighborhood of a 2, 3, 4 goal win for Syracuse tonight. I think Towson's that good. I mean, they were up on the Orange at the half last year in the NCAA tournament first round, and I think they've returned about as much as Syracuse returned from last year. Their face-off guy really struggled last year against John Mullen, Matt Constantinides. He's back, and he's a good veteran face-off guy. So if John Mullen just has his number, that could be really big and something to monitor in this game tonight. But overall, I think Towson is going in with designs on winning this game. It would be a pretty big upset in a way if Syracuse lost the game, but considering they're on a quick turnaround, Towson's had more time to prepare, I would expect it to be a close game tonight.
All right. You'll be on the call.
Yes.
So it's a 5 o'clock game.
5 o'clock, yeah. So 4:30 we'll get it going, and then I cannot do the Coach Jack radio show because they're on at the same time.
Right.
But that's still going on tonight, 7 p.m. at the Wegmans Burger Bar in DeWitt.
All right. Very good. Great stuff as always, Tim. Thanks so much for coming on. Tim Leonard. And with that, we'll open up the phone lines the rest of the way. 315-437-7644. Back after this on ESPN Radio.